During Thanksgiving, my daughter stood up. "We've decided to cut you out of this family." I laughed and handed her an envelope. "Here's something for all of you." When they opened it and saw what I'd done, they knew their comfortable lives were over. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I'm Margaret Wilson, though most people call me Maggie. And at 68 years old, I never thought I'd be sitting in my small apartment telling this story. But here we are. And trust me, it's worth your time. That Thanksgiving dinner happened 3 weeks ago. But to understand how we got there, I need to take you back 6 months to the day my world fell apart. And then, slowly and methodically, I put it back together again. It started with Harold's funeral. My husband of 45 years had died of a sudden heart attack while tending to his beloved rose garden. One minute he was pruning the yellow climbers by our back fence, the next, he was gone. The roses kept blooming, but everything else stopped. Susan, my daughter, and her husband David, were wonderful during the funeral arrangements. They handled the details I couldn't manage, hosted relatives at their beautiful colonial home, and made sure I ate something other than grief and regret. Michael, my son, flew in from Seattle with his wife, Patricia, and their twin boys. For a few days, we felt like a real family again. "Mom, you can't stay in that big house alone," Susan said the week after we buried Harold. She was sitting at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd fed her breakfast before school for 12 years. "It's not safe, and honestly, it's not practical." I looked around the kitchen. Harold and I had renovated it 5 years earlier. The subway tile backsplash, the farmhouse sink, the island where we'd shared coffee every morning for the past decade. "This is my home, Susan. It's where your father and I built our life." "I know, Mom. And we're not saying you have to move tomorrow. But think about it. 4 bedrooms, that huge yard, all the maintenance. Dad handled most of that, didn't he?" She wasn't wrong. Harold had been the handyman, the gardener, the one who knew which switch controlled which light. But I wasn't helpless, despite what my children seemed to think. "We found a lovely senior community about 20 minutes from us," David added. "Independent living but with support services if you need them. A pool, activities, people your own age, people my age," as if I'd suddenly become ancient instead of simply widowed. But they wore me down, as loving adult children do when they think they know what's best. Over the next month, they scheduled tours of senior communities, brought me brochures, and gently but persistently painted a picture of a life that would be easier and safer for someone in my situation. So, I sold the house, our house, the place where Susan had taken her first steps, and Michael had broken his arm falling out of the maple tree, where Harold and I had slow danced in the living room on our 25th anniversary and argued about paint colors when we remodeled the bathroom. I sold it and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and offered active senior living, which, as far as I could tell, meant bingo twice a week and a sad excuse for a fitness center. The apartment wasn't terrible, just soulless, beige walls, beige carpet, beige everything. I'd lived in a house full of color and life for 45 years, surrounded by the quilts I'd made, the furniture Harold had refinished, and the photographs chronicling decades of family vacations and celebrations. Now I had 1,200 square feet of beige and the monthly rent that came with it. "You'll love it once you settle in," Susan assured me, helping me arrange my now homeless furniture in spaces it wasn't designed for. My dining room set, which had hosted countless family dinners, looked ridiculous in the apartment's tiny eating area. The hutch that had held my good china couldn't fit anywhere at all. "We'll store it in our basement," David offered. "You can visit it whenever you want." Visit my own china, as if it were in prison. The first month was the hardest. I'd wake up reaching for Harold, forgetting he wasn't there, then remember where I was, and feel the double loss all over again. My husband and my home, both gone within weeks of each other. But I'm not the type to wallow. Never have been. Harold used to joke that I could find the silver lining in a tornado. So, I threw myself into making the best of my new situation. I joined the book club, tried the water aerobics, and even went to a few social mixers where widows and widowers made awkward conversation over grocery store sheet cake. That's when Susan started having her financial difficulties. It began innocently enough. A phone call on a Tuesday evening. Susan's voice was tight with stress. "Mom, I hate to ask, but we're having a cash flow problem. David's commission check got delayed, and our mortgage payment is due tomorrow. Could you possibly ... Of course, I could. What was I saving money for at this point? I had the life insurance payout, the proceeds from the house sale, and Harold's pension, more money than I'd ever had in my life, actually, sitting in accounts earning minimal interest. How much do you need, honey? Just enough to cover the mortgage. $3,200. I'll pay you back as soon as David's check comes through. I transferred the money that night. Electronic banking was one of the few technological advances I'd embraced enthusiastically. So convenient, so quick. The payback never happened. Of course, there was always something. David's commission structure changed. Susan's part-time marketing job lost a big client. The car needed expensive repairs. Emily needed money for her junior year activities. I didn't mind, really. Family helps family. And what else was I going to spend my money on? Fancy dinners for one. Cruise ships full of other lonely seniors. By November, I'd given them over $35,000. Mortgage payments, credit card minimums, Emily's SAT prep course, Ryan's orthodontist bills, the family vacation to Mexico they'd already committed to when their finances got tight. I discovered the truth entirely by accident. Emily, my 16-year-old granddaughter, had left her Instagram open on my iPad after showing me photos from her homecoming dance. I wasn't snooping. I was just trying to close the app so I could get back to my book when I saw David's latest post. It was a picture of him and Susan at some upscale restaurant, champagne glasses raised, big smiles. The caption read, "Celebrating another successful quarter. When you work hard, you reward yourself. #blessed, living our best life. Double quotes, upscale dining. Successful quarter." When just 2 weeks earlier, Susan had called crying about how they couldn't afford Emily's college application fees. I scrolled through more posts. My coffee grew cold as the truth unfolded in perfectly filtered photographs. The weekend getaway to recover from financial stress that looked suspiciously like a luxury spa resort. The modest family dinner at a restaurant where I knew the entrees cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. The small upgrade to David's car that appeared to be a brand new BMW. All posted while I was writing checks for their mortgage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Harold, how he'd worked double shifts at the plant for years so we could pay off our house early, how we'd driven the same cars until they literally couldn't run anymore, how we'd saved every penny for our retirement, dreaming of the trips we'd take and the time we'd have together. Time we never got because he died 6 months after retiring. The next morning, I called Susan. I kept my voice light and casual. "Hi honey, how are things going?" "Oh, the same old struggles," she said. "David's commission check is late, again, and we're behind on Emily's car insurance." Interesting. According to Instagram, David had just closed the biggest deal of his quarter. "That's terrible, sweetheart. You must be so stressed." "I am, Mom. I hate always having to ask you for help, but I don't know what else to do." The lie came so easily to her. She'd had plenty of practice, apparently. "How much do you need this time? Could you manage $800? I know it's a lot, but double quotes, of course. I'll transfer it this afternoon." But I didn't transfer anything. Instead, I made an appointment with James Patterson, the estate attorney who'd handled Harold's will, a smart man with a reputation for protecting seniors from exactly the kind of situation I was apparently in. His office was everything you'd expect from a successful lawyer. Leather chairs, law books, diplomas on dark wood walls. But James himself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Wilson, thank you for coming in. How can I help you?" I told him everything. The move to the apartment, the money requests, the Instagram discovery. By the end of my story, his expression had shifted from professional interest to barely contained outrage. "Mrs. Wilson, in legal terms, what's happening to you is called financial exploitation of an elder. Your daughter and son-in-law are exploiting your generosity and your love for them to fund their lifestyle. They're my family, Mr. Patterson. Family helps family. Family helps family in times of genuine need, not to pay for luxury vacations while lying about financial hardship. You've given them $35,000 in 4 months. That's not help. That's being taken advantage of." The words stung because they were true. I'd raised Susan to be better than this. I taught her about honesty, integrity, and hard work. Apparently, I'd failed somewhere along the way. "What can I do about it?" I asked. Joms leaned back in his chair. "Several things. First, we can document everything: bank records, text messages, social media posts. Second, we can cut off their access to your funds immediately. Third, if you want to take it further, we can pursue legal action for the money they've already taken under false pretenses. Legal action against my own daughter. The thought made me physically sick. I don't want to send her to jail, Mr. Patterson. That's understandable, but you need to protect yourself, Mrs. Wilson. This pattern will continue unless you stop it. People who exploit their older relatives rarely stop voluntarily. Older relatives, is that what I was now? We spent the next hour going over my options. James suggested starting with financial protection, new bank accounts they couldn't access, a review of all my assets, and documentation of their deception. Then we'd see how they responded. One more thing, James said as I prepared to leave. Do you have other family members who might be involved in this? Your son, perhaps? I hadn't considered that possibility. Michael lived in Seattle, called every week, and sent thoughtful cards and gifts. He'd never asked me for money or mentioned financial problems. I don't think so. Michael seems to be doing well on his own. Good, you'll need allies in the family who aren't compromised by financial interests. This kind of situation often divides families along money lines. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since Harold died. I cooked a real dinner for myself, pot roast with vegetables the way Harold loved it. I set the table with my good dishes, the ones Susan had said I couldn't keep because the apartment was too small for entertaining. I could keep them. This was my home now, small as it was, and I could use my own china whenever I wanted. While the roast cooked, I went through 4 months of bank statements, highlighting every transfer to Susan and David. The total was actually higher than I'd estimated. $37,800. Enough to buy a decent car, enough for a real vacation, not the budget senior cruise Susan had suggested. I take instead of helping them with their mortgage. My phone rang during dinner. Susan, of course. Mom, I'm so sorry to bother you, but did you forget to send the money for Emily's insurance? No, honey, I didn't forget. A pause. Oh, well, could you send it tonight? The payment is due first thing tomorrow. Susan, I've been thinking, maybe you and David should look into financial counseling. There are programs that can help families manage their budgets better. Another pause, longer this time. Mom, we don't need counseling. We need temporary help until David's commission structure stabilizes. It's been for months, sweetheart. That doesn't seem very temporary. Are you saying you won't help us? Her voice had an edge I didn't recognize. I'm saying I think you need to find a more sustainable solution than asking your widowed mother for money every week. The silence stretched between us like a fault line. Fine, Susan finally said. I'll figure something else out. But don't blame me when Emily can't drive to her job because we can't afford insurance. She actually hung up on me. I sat there holding the phone, wondering when my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. The next few weeks were tense. Susan called less frequently, and when she did, her voice was cool and distant. She didn't ask for money but made sure to mention every financial stress they were experiencing: Emily's college applications, Ryan's basketball tournament, fees, the furnace that might need replacing before winter. Each mention felt like a guilt trip wrapped in family conversation. Meanwhile, I was busy with James Patterson, building what he called financial firewalls, new bank accounts at a different institution. Investment accounts Susan and David had never known about, a safe deposit box for important documents. You're being very smart about this, James told me during one of our meetings. Most people in your situation wait until the damage is much worse before taking action. How much worse could it get? I've seen adult children drain their parents' entire life savings, 7 figures. Sometimes, the victims often don't realize what's happening until they're facing eviction or can't afford medical care. That's when he told me about Mrs. Chen, an 82-year-old woman whose son had forged her signature on a reverse mortgage and spent the money on cryptocurrency. About Mr. Rodriguez, whose daughter-in-law had convinced him to add her name to all his accounts, then cleaned them out before filing for divorce. Horror stories that made my situation look almost quaint. The holiday season is often when these situations come to a head, James warned. Families gather, expectations are high, and financial stress peaks. Your daughter and her husband are probably expecting their usual Christmas windfall from you. Christmas? I hadn't even thought about it. Last year, Harold and I had given Susan's family $5,000 to help make Christmas special for the kids. This year, they'd probably expect more, especially since they thought I had more money to spare after selling the house. What would you advise? Set boundaries now, before the requests start. Decide what you're willing to give, if anything, and stick to it. Don't let guilt or manipulation change your mind. That night, I made my decision. I would give Emily and Ryan $500 each for Christmas, directly to them, not through their parents. No money for Susan and David. No help with holiday expenses, travel costs, or special dinner funds. I was going to have my first honest Christmas in months, but Susan had other plans. The call came on a Monday night in early November. She was crying, which immediately put me on high alert. Susan wasn't a crier. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise not to get angry." Those words. Every parent knows nothing good follows those words. "What's wrong, honey?" "We've been having problems with David's company. He might lose his job. There's been some restructuring, and his position is being eliminated." My heart sank despite everything. Losing a job right before the holidays was genuinely terrible news. "Oh, Susan, I'm so sorry. When will he know for sure?" "Next week." "But Mom, here's the thing. Even if he keeps his job, they're cutting his territory in half. His income is going to drop by at least 40%. That's awful. Have you started looking at your budget? Figuring out what expenses you can cut?" "We've looked at everything, Mom. We're already running pretty lean." Lean, right? Lean people don't post pictures of themselves at $200 per person restaurants. There's something else. Susan continued. "Something I probably should have told you months ago. Here it comes," I thought. "When we asked you to help with the mortgage, it wasn't just a temporary cash flow problem. We've been behind for almost a year. We're in danger of losing the house, the beautiful colonial with the perfect landscaping and the 2-car garage. The house I'd been paying the mortgage on for months, thinking I was helping with a temporary problem. They were about to lose it anyway." "Susan, how behind are you?" 6 months, maybe 7, but if we can catch up on the payments and prove we have steady income, the bank said they'd work with us. 7 months. 7 months of missed payments while they went to expensive restaurants and posted about their #blessed lifestyle on social media. How much would it take to catch up? Around $25,000. I know it's a huge amount, but if we lose the house, where will Emily and Ryan go to school? How will we rebuild our credit? We'd have to rent some apartment in a different district, and Emily's in her junior year, Mom. We can't uproot her now. $25,000 on top of the nearly $40,000 I'd already given them. Susan, I need to think about this. There's not much time. Mom, the foreclosure notice gives us 2 weeks. 2 weeks to come up with $25,000. 2 weeks to decide whether to throw good money after bad or let my grandchildren learn what consequences look like. I'll call you tomorrow, I told her. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Harold's funeral. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then, I called James Patterson's emergency line. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Wilson, are you all right?" "No, I don't think I am. They're about to lose their house, and they want me to bail them out again." "How much this time?" $25 to catch up on mortgage payments they've been missing for months, while I was helping them make current payments. James was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Wilson, they've been committing fraud. They took money from you under false pretenses, claiming they needed help with current mortgage payments while knowing they were already in foreclosure." Fraud. Such a harsh word for what my daughter had done to me. What happens if I say no? They'll likely lose the house. They'll have to find somewhere else to live, probably rent for a while, until they can rebuild their credit. Your grandchildren will probably have to change schools. And what happens if I say yes? You'll be out $65,000 total with no guarantee that they won't be back in the same situation 6 months from now. Plus, you'll be enabling a pattern of financial irresponsibility that will only get worse. I knew he was right. I'd known it for weeks. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are 2 very different things. "There's something else you should consider," James continued. "Thanksgiving is next week. Based on what you've told me about your daughter's behavior, I suspect this conversation about the house is setting up for a much bigger confrontation. They're going to want an answer, and they're probably counting on the family holiday setting to pressure you into saying yes." Thanksgiving, the holiday Harold and I had hosted for 20 years before moving to Susan's house, became the tradition. the holiday that was supposed to be about gratitude and family. What would you do, Mr. Patterson? If it were my daughter, I'd protect myself and let them face the natural consequences of their choices. But I understand that's easier said than done when it's your family. After I hung up, I sat in my beige apartment and looked at the photo on my side table. Harold and me on our 40th anniversary, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. He'd been so proud when we paid off our house early, so careful with money, so determined to build something solid for our old age. If he were here now, what would he tell me to do? I think I already knew the answer, but I also knew I wasn't quite ready to act on it yet. I had one more week to decide whether to save my daughter's family or save myself. As it turned out, the decision would be made for me. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and cold, which seemed appropriate for what I knew would be our last family holiday together. I'd made my decision Tuesday night after discovering one final insult that pushed me over the edge. Emily had called me directly, bypassing her parents entirely. "Grandma, can I ask you something privately?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Are Mom and Dad having money problems? They keep whispering and seem really stressed." Out of the mouths of babes. "Why do you ask?" "Well, Mom told me you can't afford to help with my college applications because you're on a fixed income now. But then I saw Dad's new golf clubs, and they cost like $3,000. I looked them up online. $3,000 golf clubs bought while they told their daughter that Grandma couldn't afford her $400 college application fees. That's when I knew I was done being the family ATM. I arrived at Susan's house carrying a green casserole dish full of my famous sweet potato souffle and a manila envelope that would change everything. The envelope contained copies of every bank transfer, every Instagram post, and every lie documented in neat chronological order, along with something else that would ensure they never tried this with anyone again. "Mom," Susan greeted me with an unusually enthusiastic hug. "You look wonderful. That color is perfect on you." The compliments were flowing early. David appeared with a glass of wine and his biggest smile. "Margaret, so good to see you. How are you settling into the apartment?" "'Tis fine, thank you." Emily and Ryan hugged me genuinely, and for a moment, I felt terrible about what was about to happen. But then I remembered that protecting them from their parents' financial irresponsibility might be the kindest thing I could do. Dinner conversation was carefully steered away from money topics. They discussed Emily's college plans, Ryan's basketball season, David's work projects, all very normal, very pleasant, very fake. After dessert, Susan and David exchanged glances. "Showtime, Mom," Susan began. "We wanted to talk to you about the house situation." "Of course," I said, folding my napkin carefully. "We know it's an enormous amount of money, but we've talked to the bank, and if we can bring the mortgage current by Monday, they'll work with us on a modified payment plan." "That's wonderful news." David leaned forward earnestly. "The thing is, Margaret, this really is our last chance. After this, there are no more options." "I understand. So, we were hoping." Susan's voice trailed off. "You were hoping I'd give you $25,000 loan," David corrected quickly. "We'd pay you back with interest." I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope. "Actually, I have something for all of you." Susan looked confused but pleased. "Oh, Mom, you didn't need to bring gifts." "Open it." Susan opened the envelope and pulled out the stack of documents, bank statements, on top. I watched her face as she realized what she was looking at. "What is this?" "Documentation of every lie you've told me for the past 4 months." The color drained from David's face. "Margaret, I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You took $37,800 from me while claiming financial hardship, then spent my money on vacations, expensive dinners, and golf clubs while your mortgage went unpaid." "Mom, you're taking this out of context," Susan said, but her hands were shaking. "Really, what context makes it acceptable to lie to your widowed mother about needing help with mortgage payments when you're actually 7 months behind?" Emily looked between her parents with growing horror. "Is this true? Have you been lying to Grandma?" "It's complicated, sweetheart," David said. "No, it's not," I said, standing up from the table. "It's fraught, and it stops now." That's when Susan played her final card. "We decided to cut you out of this family." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Emily gasped. Ryan stared at his mother in disbelief. David looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. And I laughed. Not a bitter laugh or a sad laugh, but genuine amusement. After months of manipulation, guilt trips, and outright lies, Susan thought she could threaten me with abandonment to get her money. Well, I said, reaching back into the envelope, in that case, you'll definitely want to see the rest of this. I pulled out a second set of documents and placed them on the table. This is a report from the private investigator I hired last week. The silence was absolute. It documents every expensive purchase you've made with my money. Every restaurant meal, every vacation day, every luxury item, all cross-referenced with your social media posts and credit card statements. David's face had gone completely white. You hired an investigator. I also filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office for financial exploitation of an elder. That's the third document in your stack. Susan was frantically flipping through the papers now, her composure completely shattered. You can't do this to us. We're your family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Susan. But since I'm apparently no longer part of this family, I suppose that makes you common criminals instead of just ungrateful relatives. Grandma, Emily said quietly, what's going to happen to us? I'm going to have a very peaceful Thanksgiving at home with a good book. As for your parents, that depends on how cooperative they want to be with the authorities. That's when David lost it completely. You vindictive old woman, do you have any idea what you've just done? We'll lose everything. You already lost everything when you decided to treat me like a mark instead of a mother. The kids will have to change schools. The kids will learn that actions have consequences, something you clearly never taught them. Susan tried one more approach, tears streaming down her face. Mom, please, if you do this, you'll never see your grandchildren again. I looked at Emily and Ryan, both staring at their parents with expressions of shock and disappointment. That broke my heart. Sweetheart, I said to Emily, you'll be 18 in 2 years. You can decide for yourself whether you want a relationship with a grandmother who refuses to enable your parents' bad behavior, or with parents who would use you as emotional blackmail to get money. Then I picked up my purse and coat. The investigator's report includes a recommendation that you seek financial counseling and possibly treatment for your spending behaviors. I'd suggest you take that advice seriously. I walked to the door, then turned back one final time. Oh, and Susan, happy Thanksgiving. The phone call started at 6 a.m. the next morning. First, Susan crying hysterically, then David alternating between rage and desperate pleading. Then Susan again with a more calculated approach. Mom, I know you're angry, but think about what you're doing to Emily and Ryan. They don't deserve to be punished for our mistakes. I'd been up since 5 a.m., drinking coffee and watching the sunrise from my small balcony. Amazing how peaceful mornings could be when you weren't dreading the next request for money. You're right, Susan, they don't deserve to be punished. But they also don't deserve parents who lie, steal, and use them as shields when they're caught. We never meant for it to go this far. Which part, the lying part or the stealing part? We're not criminals, Mom. We're just people who made some bad decisions when we were desperate. Desperate people don't spend $3,000 on golf clubs while claiming they can't afford their child's college applications. Silence. By noon, I'd received 17 phone calls, 43 text messages, and 2 emails. The content ranged from tearful apologies to legal threats, to promises they'd never ask for money again if I just dropped the complaint. I responded to exactly none of them. James Patterson called at 2 p.m. Mrs. Wilson, I've been contacted by an attorney representing your daughter and son-in-law. They'd like to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? Full restitution of the money they took. Plus, they want you to sign an agreement not to pursue criminal charges or civil action. And in return, they'll agree to have no further contact with you. I had to laugh at that. They think no contact with them is something I'd pay to achieve. Apparently, their attorney seems to think family relationships were more important to you than money. They're wrong. At this point, self-respect is more important to me than either family relationships or money. So, you want to proceed with the complaint. I thought about Emily and Ryan, about Susan as a little girl bringing me dandelions she thought were flowers, about David nervously asking for my permission to marry my daughter. Then I thought about Harold working double shifts so we could pay off our house, about the promises we'd made to each other, to be careful with money so we could have security in our old age. Yes, I said, we proceed. That evening, Michael called from Seattle. Mom, Susan called me crying. She says you filed some kind of legal complaint against them. Finally, the conversation I'd been dreading. I filed a complaint for financial exploitation of an elder. They took almost $40,000 from me under false pretenses. $40,000. Jesus, Mom, I had no idea it was that much. They've been lying to me for months. Michael, claiming they needed help with current expenses while they were already in foreclosure. Using my money for luxury items while telling Emily I couldn't afford her college applications. That single quotes double quotes. Michael was quiet for a long moment. That's really messed up, Mom. I'm sorry. You're not angry with me for protecting myself from people who were stealing from you. No, I'm not angry. I'm proud of you. I started crying, then relief, gratitude, love for this son who saw the situation clearly and supported me despite the family drama. Patricia and I have been talking. Michael continued. We want you to come visit for Christmas. Stay as long as you want. The boys would love to spend time with their grandmother. For the first time in months, Christmas sounded like something to look forward to. The settlement conference was scheduled for the following Tuesday in James Patterson's office. Susan and David arrived with their attorney, a sharp-dressed man who specialized in damage control. They both looked terrible. David had lost weight and developed worry lines around his eyes. Susan's usual perfect hair and makeup were replaced with the appearance of someone who'd been sleeping poorly and crying frequently. Their attorney, Richard Price, opened with an aggressive stance. Mrs. Wilson, my clients acknowledged that there may have been some misunderstandings about the nature of the financial assistance you provided, but filing criminal complaints against your own family is extreme and vindictive. James didn't even look up from his notes. Your clients committed financial exploitation of an elder. There's no misunderstanding about depositing checks under false pretenses. The money was given freely by a family member who wanted to help. The money was obtained through fraud. My client has documentation of lies told to obtain each transfer. Price shifted tactics. Mrs. Wilson, surely you don't want to see your daughter go to jail. Think about your grandchildren. That's when I'd had enough. Mr. Price, for 4 months, I've been told to think about my grandchildren every time I questioned my daughter's financial requests. I've been told to think about my grandchildren while my daughter lied to my face about needing money for mortgage payments she wasn't making. I've been told to think about my grandchildren while my son-in-law spent my money on golf clubs and told his daughter I was too poor to help with her college. I leaned forward. I have thought about my grandchildren, and I've decided they deserve better parents than the ones they have. Susan sobbed louder. David stared at the table. Price looked like he was reconsidering his fee structure. However, I continued, I'm willing to discuss alternatives. James looked surprised. We hadn't discussed alternatives. I want full restitution of the $37,800. I want a written apology acknowledging what they did, and I want them to attend financial counseling for 6 months. And in return, Price asked, I'll agree not to pursue criminal charges. The civil complaint stays active until restitution is complete, but no jail time. Susan looked up hopefully. And we can rebuild our relationship. No, Susan. That ship sailed when you decided to cut me out of the family yesterday. This is purely a business transaction now. David finally spoke. We don't have $37,000. Then you'll make payments. James will draw up a schedule. What if we can't make the payments? James answered that one. Then the criminal complaint gets reactivated, and you'll deal with both the civil and criminal courts. Price whispered something to his clients, then addressed us again. We need time to consider this offer. You have until Friday, I said. After that, we proceed with criminal charges. As they filed out, Susan stopped at the door. Mom, I'm sorry. I know you probably don't believe me, but I really am sorry. I believe you're sorry you got caught, Susan. I don't believe you're sorry. You did it. She left without another word. That evening, James called me at home. I have to ask, Mrs. Wilson, are you really willing to send your daughter to jail if she doesn't accept the settlement? I thought about that for a long time. James, if she were a stranger who had stolen $40,000 from me, would you ask me that question? No, I wouldn't. Then you have your answer. 6 months later, I'm writing this story from my new apartment in Seattle. 3 blocks from Michael and Patricia's house. The view from my living room window shows the Olympic Mountains instead of a parking lot. And my kitchen is big enough for the dining set that had been stored in Susan's basement. The settlement was signed. Susan and David are making payments of $800 per month, which will take them just over 4 years to complete. They lost their house anyway. Turned out the $25,000 I refused to give them wouldn't have been enough to save it after all. Emily is finishing her junior year at a new school and working part-time to save for college. Ryan has adapted well to apartment living and a more modest lifestyle. They've made every payment on time so far. Michael's family has welcomed me with the kind of warmth I'd forgotten was possible. I have my own space, but see my grandsons several times a week. I'm teaching 10-year-old Marcus to bake Harold's famous chocolate chip cookies. 8-year-old Luke has decided I give the best hugs in Washington. I joined a book club here, started volunteering at the local literacy center, and even tried hiking for the first time at age 69. Turns out I'm pretty good at it, and the coffee afterward is excellent. Last month I received an unexpected letter. Emily had written to tell me she'd been accepted to 3 colleges with partial scholarships. She thanked me for refusing to enable her parents' bad behavior and said she was learning to appreciate earning things instead of having them handed to her. She also mentioned that Susan and David were attending support meetings in addition to financial counseling. Apparently, David's commission delays had been caused by significant losses. The expensive dinners and purchases hadn't been celebrations of success, but attempts to maintain appearances while their world collapsed around them. I felt sad reading that letter, but not guilty. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to help them destroy themselves. Harold used to say that the hardest part of parenting wasn't knowing when to catch your children when they fell, but knowing when to let them hit the ground so they'd learn to be more careful next time. It took me 68 years to understand what he meant. Susan hasn't tried to contact me directly since the settlement signing, but she sends updates through Michael occasionally. They're both working now, living within their means, and slowly rebuilding their credit. Emily has started speaking to them again. Though their relationship is different now, some bridges can be repaired, others can only be replaced with something entirely new. As for me, I'm living the life Harold and I dreamed of for our retirement, traveling when I want to, spoiling my grandchildren responsibly, and making my own choices about how to spend my money and my time. I still miss Harold every day, but I no longer feel guilty about being happy without him, and I never, ever feel guilty about protecting myself from people who would take advantage of my love for them, even if those people are family, especially if those people are family. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.